Well met, everyone. I am Rich the Lich, and today I'm going to show you how to build a monster. So I'm not talking Frankenstein here. There are some charts in the DMG, various things on creating an encounter, and from there you can start to calculate out the EXP budget that you might have based on the level of your group, and you can then start to piece together by looking through the various monster books, monster manual, and so on, and kind of just come together with a hodgepodge of various monsters and things like this. But taking it further, in the DMG, there is also a chart, which you will see here on screen. Now, there's a lot going on screen, so when I'm just chatting with you, as I am right now, the camera will switch over to me. But otherwise, you'll be paying attention to what's on screen because there's a lot of little details here. So what we have is a chart called Monster Stats by Challenge Rating, and it gives you some baseline stats all the way from a CR 0, 1/8, 1/4, 1/2, all the way up to CR 30, such as the legendary Tarasque. And it gives you some rough guidelines on what the armor class of such a monster would be, the hit point range, what their attack bonus is, and what is their damage per round, and if you're dealing with sort of a spellcastery class, what kind of a save DC might they have. What I'm going to do for this video is I'm going to create a single monster, or at least show you the process. I'm not going to show you any pictures of what the monster might look like. We're not actually going to stat him out completely as he would be laid out in a monster manual, but I'll kind of just show you how to navigate your way through this chart and talk about some things to consider so that when you want to create your own monsters or perhaps manipulate some ones that are already there. That is what is indicated within this section in the DMG. This is official DMG written material. But one thing that it says is sometimes you want to create something a little bit spicy, a little bit better, a little bit more fun, kind of like what I do in my Fun Fights videos. We're not talking environmental stuff here. What the charts help you do is they help you kind of wrangle in if you have an orc, but you want your orc to be able to have advantage more often, or perhaps you want your orc to be wearing different armor, or perhaps you want your orc to have twice as many hit points, and instead of using the great axe, he's dual wielding long swords or something like this. These charts will kind of walk you through how to wrangle that in, but they can be a bit unwieldy. Let me show you what's what. So as I said, we have monster stats by challenge rating. So what I'm going to have over here is I have this little, everything in the red box is what I've already laid out on the type of monster I want to create. And I will talk you through my process and how I went through this. And in the end, I'll show you what kind of an encounter that might be for a given party. Now, what we're talking about is, let's assume I have 4 PCs in my group and I want to challenge them. And all 4 PCs are level 8. This is the general statement on how the CR of a monster works. So say we have a CR4 monster. A CR4 monster is intended, based on the various stats that a CR4 monster would have, you know, what its hit points are, its AC, the things that would make sense for a CR4 monster. It's not going to be a spellcaster that has 9th level spells, right? A CR4 monster should be a decent challenge for 4 level 4 PCs. A CR10 monster should be a decent challenge for 4 level 10 PCs. 4 is always sort of that magic number. Once you get players less than 4, so 3 or less players, or as it says in the book when you're calculating like EXP modifiers, once you start getting 6 or more, 5 to 6 or more PCs, it starts to skew the kind of balance a little bit. So the sweet spot is always 4 PCs, and you take whatever the levels or the average level of the PCs are, and whatever that number is, an equivalently difficult challenge, that sounded a little weird, a challenge of an equal number should be a decent fight for the group. We're not talking about something that's overly deadly, so it's not really going to result in a TPK, and we're not talking something that's too easy where it's a trivial encounter. So, once again, 4 level 20s in your group should be decently challenged by a single level 20 CR monster, and so on. So based on that knowledge and that base, what I'm going to do is I'm creating a monster working off of a CR 8. That is the base of our monster. So I'm intending to create a monster that is a decent challenge for 4 PCs at level 8. Okay, so we're going to start with a CR 8. Now here's some attributes and things that I know I want. I want my monster to have very high hit points. I want him to have a good AC, a little bit better than average for that CR level. I also want him to have extremely high damage output, And then there's some traits, and I'll show you how to kind of walk through that. There's a list, tons and tons of them, pages of traits. And I want to give him aggressive, I want to give him blood frenzy, and I want to give him reckless. And I will talk you through what those 3 traits are and what are their consequences or ramifications and how they modify the EXP or the CR of a thing. And ultimately what's going to end up happening is I'm going to come up with a final CR to indicate to us what CR this actual monster is based on the various things that I want to give him. And as a result of that, I can then sort of backwards convert that CR and show you what type of EXP that thing would be worth. And from that chart, with the EXP chart, it'll kind of put us into a range, as is kind of indicated down here in the blue box, on are we talking about this thing being an easy encounter or is this a deadly encounter? So let's walk through this. So we have a CR monster, a CR8 monster as my base, right? Instead of just looking at this column where the CRs are along the left and going with 8, what you want to do first is you need to calculate out the offensive capability and then the defensive capability of any given monster. And then what you do is you have a CR that comes from the defensive side of things, and then you have a CR that comes from the offensive side of things. You average out the two, and that is how you determine what the overall CR of that monster will be. What I'm going to do is calculate out the defensive CR of this monster first. There's 2 major attributes you're looking for. You're looking at how many hit points does this have, and what is its AC. Makes sense for defense, right? How hard is this thing to kill? So what I will do is I want to create something with high hit points. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to gauge kind of around how many hit points would a CR8 monster have. All right. A CR8 monster is in this range here. Okay. It's showing you somewhere between 176 and 190. As I indicated that I want this thing to have high hit points, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on the top end range. So we'll just say that this guy has 190 hit points. Okay. I want him to have good AC. So what you do is you use the base of the hit points first, and then you look at what column you're in. Okay. I want to kind of look at, to give me an initial starting point, I need to think about the overall base CR that I want to work with. As I said, I have 4 8th level PCs, so I want to start at sort of even ground. So I'm looking around the CR8 range. Another way you can look at this is you can simply just say, I want my monster to have 400 hit points. Okay, what does that mean? Well, if I look through these categories here, a 400 hit point monster is somewhere around a CR20 or 21 monster. You can go that route, but there's going to be a lot of modifications you're going to make this CR drop down significantly, because a CR20 or 21 encounter versus your 4 level 8 PCs, that's already skewed off the charts, right? That's way overpowered. So what I did is I just said, I want to work with around CR8 first. Let's see what hit point range that is. And that's where I came up with the 190. I'm going to put them on the max range. Now what you do is once you have the column, which is this one here, you then calculate out the AC. And the way that works is for every 2 AC higher, the CR of that encounter goes up by 1. Or I'm sorry, the CR of its defensive aspects goes up by 1. For every 2 points of AC lower, meaning he's easier to hit, you reduce the defensive CR by 1. So in this column, something with 190 hit points is a base CR of 8, which is what I want. It would be roughly an AC 16 monster. I want him to have more AC. He has full plate, which is going to be a base of AC 18. So the moment I move him up to an AC 18, I've qualified in moving him up 2 points. Okay, it's always move up 2. For every increment of 2, you move up, or every increment of 2, you move down. You adjust the CR accordingly. So as I moved him up 2 points to an AC 18, that would increase the defensive CR of this guy to a 9. And that is where this number came from. Defensive CR of 9. Good. We have our defensive CR. It's 9. Now we need to come up with the offensive CR, which is based around 2 categories. What is this thing's damage output per round? And what is this thing's attack bonus? Similar to how you come up with the hit point block first, so about how many hit points does it have first, and then whatever column that is in, then you calculate the AC, and any changes to it would change the CR. In this regard, in offensive category, you come up with the damage output first. That tells you what column you're in, and then by changing the attack bonus, you can manipulate the CR, right? So, is there any information we have here? I say here that I want my monster to be able to do approximately 100 damage per round. Basically capable of dropping a player in one round, right? I know that our NCR is going to be very different than what my base is, but my base is my starting point. A CR8 encounter, or I keep saying that, I apologize. A CR8 monster should be a good challenge for 4 level 8s. Assuming my party's level 8, if I had a barbarian, without calculating it out with their constitution and otherwise in die rolls, let's assume that the highest hit point PC in my group is a barbarian with around 95 hit points. The reason why I came up with this 100 damage per round type thing is I want my monster to be able to potentially drop even the barbarian, any single PC in one round of combat through his attacks. So therefore, I now came up with 100 damage per round. Very simply, you move through and you see damage per round. It's nothing here, so we're already in the higher CRs. And there it is, 99 to 104. So based on that 100 damage per round that I want to deal, we are looking at a CR 16. Now remember, you're finding defensive and offensive, and then you're calculating out the total CR of the monster, okay? So far, our offensive monster, his capability is equivalent to a level 16 CR. Now, if I left it as is, I would just simply say his offensive CR is 16. But just as I manipulated the AC to skew the challenge up or down, I want this guy to have a high attack bonus as well. Only when you move this stated attack bonus up or down by 2 do you manipulate the CR. Since we're only going from a +9 to a +10, the CR doesn't change, okay? But for example, if I was to say I want this guy to have a +13 to hit, you don't just look for the 13, which is down here, and say, oh, it's a CR 27. It doesn't work like that because it's now skewed my damage output. I went from wanting to deal 100 damage a round all the way up to 250 a round, okay? That's what equivalent. A CR 27, that's like Demon Prince or something like this, right? We're getting close to Tarasque level. That's why the damage output. So you don't just look at that. Okay, what you do is you find that initial category, just as with offensive CR, you find, just as with defensive CR, you find the hit point bracket that you want to be in, you look across that whole chart, and then as you skew the AC by 2, you either make the CR more by 1 or lower by 1, okay? In this regard, I still want my monster to only deal about 100 damage per round, but I want to up him to a +10, okay? With my example, if I said I want to move him up to a 13, from 9 to 11, that would move him from a 16 to a 17 CR, and then from 11 to 13, that would move him to an 18 CR. So that is how that changes from what's listed here. My attack bonus +13 guy that's in the 100 damage per round category is actually only a CR 18 guy versus a CR 27. You always use the damage that you can deal per round as sort of your base. So in this regard, I want to keep this guy at a +10. Since I'm only moving it up by 1, I don't change the CR at all. That is why my offensive CR becomes a 16. Okay? Now what you do is you simply take the average. My defensive CR is 9. My offensive CR is 16. That's a total of 25. You find the average of that rounding up, which is going to give us an average CR of 13. So by having a monster that can deal about 100 damage per round, by having a monster that has 190 hit points and an AC of 18, he is roughly a CR 13 monster. Now we've got some traits to give him. I wanted him to be aggressive, I want him to have blood frenzy, and I want him to have reckless. I have a cool PDF that I just bought for $1.50. It's a pay what you want. This has all the different traits on monsters and various things, so it's really easy to find this stuff. What is aggressive? It's as the orc would have. As a bonus action, the creature can move up to its speed towards a hostile creature that it can see. Where am I coming up with these? Well, if you were to look through here, you have all of these different features. And it tells you when you give a monster this, you make these effective changes. Aggressive, as an orc would have, right here. We just read it from the PDF. Aggressive says What's the effect on the challenge rating? Increase the monster's effective per round damage output by 2. I said I wanted to deal 100 damage per round. So now, just by giving him aggressive, because he's able to close the distance faster, I'm now dealing about 102 damage a round. If I went back to my chart, we see that 102 damage per round doesn't change it. So we're still talking about the same column, right? Let's take a look at the other trait I want to give him. I want to give him Reckless. Well, if we go down here and we move into the R's, here's Reckless right down here. It's like the Barbarian Berserker would get. At the start of its turn, the creature can gain advantage on all melee weapon attack rolls it makes during that turn, but all attack rolls against it have advantage as well. If I was to look at the little chart and we look at Reckless, it kind of has everything here. But this is how you can just start creating your own. I want him to have regeneration, and I want him to be able to, do this and do that. That's how you create your own monsters, but there's consequences for that, and this kind of guides you in what that means. Reckless is something that like a Minotaur would have, and you notice there's nothing there. So it doesn't affect my offensive and defensive CR. Okay? Now, the last thing I wanted to give him is I wanted to give him something called Blood Frenzy. Well, what is that? If I was to look down at my PDF, okay, you'll see, as the Sahagin has, they have something called Blood Frenzy. The creature has advantage on melee attack rolls against any creature that doesn't have all its hit points. Yeah, he's already going Reckless, but maybe at the beginning of the battle, he just goes a little nuts. He goes to give himself full advantage, but everything is hitting him with advantage. That's because nothing's hurt yet. But once he smells blood, I no longer have to use Reckless anymore. Now I'm only giving myself advantage. You're not getting advantage to hit me anymore. And as I said, the Sahagin has that, right? So if I was to just click over here just to verify, there he is. Oop, I had it. We click on this. That's the beauty of D&D Beyond, right? There it is, see? Blood Frenzy. The Sahagin has advantage on melee attack rolls against any creature that doesn't have all its hit points. Once I smell blood, it's a problem, right? So, what does that do? If we look at our little Dungeon Master's Workshop, this is in the DMG, the various monster features, we see Blood Frenzy as an example that the Sahagin might have. The effect is increase the monster's effective attack bonus by 4. Now we can look into that little part that I was talking about earlier, right? So we've got this thing going on. We're looking at offensive category. I know that I want to steal. Now, yes, I know he's got aggressive, which gave it the equivalent of like dealing 2 more damage, right? Because he's engaging into combat faster. But even though I wanted to deal 100 a round, I'm now dealing 102 a round by giving him aggressive, which keeps him in the safe category. Reckless doesn't do anything. Yes, it's cool, but it kind of balances itself because I get advantage, but you get advantage against me. But Blood Frenzy, though, it says treat it as though his attack bonus is 4 higher. Based on the rules that I kind of talked about a few minutes ago, if we're in this category here, well, now by giving him Blood Frenzy, it's treating him as having an attack bonus of 13, which was that example that I used. So to move from 9 to 11 would move it to a CR 17. To move from 11 to 13 would move it to a CR 18. And that is why here, due to traits, the offensive CR of this monster is effectively an 18. Now, therefore, what I do is I take that 18 plus the 9, puts us at a 27. Rounding up, the average CR of this monster is a 14. That is how we come up with the CR for this given monster. A monster that I wanted and intended to start with as a CR 8 base has 190 hit points, has an AC of 18, and the biggest difference, the thing that really pushed us up into that high CR, is I want to deal 100 damage a round, which is potentially killing a PC every round. Okay? That already put us up into this sort of back end of the bracket here. And then based on these changes of giving him the aggressive Blood Frenzy and Reckless traits, yes, when you can find things like this, like Reckless, or if you're looking through the chart quite simply, and you're going through here and you find some that have the little dash, these are just cool flavor things that you can add without having to wrangle in the snowball effect of whether that affects the CR or not, right? Yes, they can be powerful, and you need to consider them. As I said, always consider the makeup of your group. Even if something like Devil Sight, right? I don't want to look it up too much. Well, I will look it up. Devil Sight. There it is. Magical darkness doesn't impede the creature's dark vision, okay? Even though Devil Sight doesn't have any ramification on changing the CR of the encounter at all, If your PCs are drow and they're relying on stealth and those type of things and a lot of rogues and sneak attacks and so on and so forth, and they're creating magical darkness and they have magic items that allow them to see in darkness, maybe giving a monster devil sight might take something that the PCs thought they had an advantage with, and now it's sort of nullified that. So even though it doesn't manipulate the CR, it's still something you always want to consider. These are just guidelines, remember. You have to consider the makeup of your group. Just because I feel like the CR is manageable for my group and it's not an overly extremely deadly combat, if my group doesn't like to fight much and they're into more of the politics and the intrigue and the storytelling and social pillar of D&D or exploration pillar, not combat, even if the mechanics and the math of it ends out correct, comes out correct, maybe don't change hit points and buff them too much and give them too high of AC, because what that's going to mean is you're now changing the likelihood of your PCs hitting the monster, and you're making them miss more often, which in turn, and then if he's got to soak up 400 hit points and has resistance, which gives him half damage to everything, you've now turned that into a 3-hour encounter, right? And if your PCs and your group and your players don't like combat as much, you're soaking up 3 hours of time in something they don't like to do. So you have to always consider more than just the numbers of how difficult is this encounter. Is it a good fit? Are those additions and changes a good fit for your group? But that being said, what I was saying is when you look at these things with the hash marks, these are cool traits that you can give that don't generally affect the difficulty of the encounter. They just might add some cool flavor and make the encounter a little more unique and memorable. So that's what we have, right? Is we have this CR 14 monster with these traits, those hit points, that AC, that can deal about 100 damage around. A CR 14 monster, if I was to simply look it up, and it shows you in here, it shows you what the EXP of various CRs are, right? Right here. A CR 14 monster is an 11,500 EXP monster. If I was to kind of verify that through actual monsters, let's type in adult black dragon. He's a CR 14, and there it is, 11,500. What does that mean? Cool, we created this monster. He's worth 11,500. What the hell is a CR 14 relative to my group? Well, we're dealing with 4 level 8s, right? If I went back, now we're in this chart. When you look over at the DMG, kind of a little earlier in the pages, in a different section called Creating Combat Encounters, there's this kind of, this is how you develop the encounter difficulty. Because now I'm not just building a single monster, I'm kind of throwing in a bunch of different monsters at different CRs and different EXP values, and I'm building a budget. And then from that, I can decide how potent this combat is. All you simply do is you take your character level. I've got 4 level 8s, okay? 4 level 8s, we'll use this first number, 450 times 4, 1,800. That's where this comes from. 4 level 8, so you just go along this whole category. 900 times 4 is 3,600. 1,400 times 4. The last one, 2,100 times 4, should be 8,400. That is where these 4 numbers came from. So, if I was to kind of reverse it and go the other way, kind of different than what I'm exploring in this video, and I said, I have that's my budget. For 4 level 8s, you always kind of create this budget across the chart to find out what my budget is for an easy, medium, hard, and deadly encounter. Deadly being lethal for one or more player characters, survival often requires good tactics and quick thinking, and the party might lose. Okay, whereas easy is victory is pretty much guaranteed. They might use some hit points, maybe spend a resource or two, some spells, but otherwise it's kind of trivial. Okay. Also, on that note, I'll kind of digress a moment. You don't always have to think that the challenging, harrowing, deadly encounters are the ones that are always better. If I have a trivial encounter against some young goblins, kids, females, right? And their total EXP threshold puts them in easy for my level 8s, right? But something in that encounter happens where the paladin snaps and he just feels a great threat that these goblins are going to grow up to something else. Even though the numbers and the math of it and the mechanics say that this encounter is not a problem, if as a result the paladin ends up killing a couple of these young goblins, which maybe kind of makes you as the DM and the other players start considering that he's going towards the path of like the Oathbreaker, right? Let's say he's only level 2 and he hasn't gone committed to his subclass yet. That would create a memorable encounter because you can always say, hey, remember that one fight, dude, against that, it was like trivial, like the DM wasn't even going to have us roll, but through role play, we ended up killing those young goblins and the paladin ended up going nuts from that point on and so on and so forth. So you don't always have to equate easy or medium with it's not worthwhile. And deadly is always, deadly can just sometimes suck and not have a lot of memory. It could be over in 2 rounds. So don't think of it that way. But that's just where these numbers come from, is you just take the number of PCs, and if you had different, 10 PCs and a couple were level 6, a couple were level 4, you just use those numbers depending on the category for them. You get the total budget, and that's where these numbers right here will come from. Okay? So a deadly encounter for 4 level 8s gives us a budget of about 8,400. That, and I kind of have it listed out here, is equivalent to about a Clay Golem, who I believe is around CR 8 or 9, plus a Blood Witch from Ravnica, which is equivalent to about a level CR 7. If I took those 2 monsters and just took their default, I didn't make them have all these other traits and stuff, and just took them as written in the books, their total would be about 7,900, which puts me kind of close enough to deadly. Okay? They say to go down 1, so it's a hard encounter, but it's really close. I'm going to say that it borders on, for my 4 level 8, a Clay Golem plus Blood Witch puts me close to a deadly encounter, right? But what are we dealing with? We're dealing with an 11,500 XP encounter here. Just by saying that I have a monster with 190 hit points, AC 18, deals 100 around, and he has these 3 traits. All else aside, I haven't calculated other things. That guy is at 11,500, which is beyond my deadly budget. So I'm insanely deadly here, right? And that's the type of things that you need to consider, okay? Don't worry about this part here. We'll just disregard that, but you have different modifiers, and there's a lot of things to wrangle in. But the point of all this was just showing you sort of how you kind of calculate this based on what's in the DMG. Figure out your budgets. You can kind of work either from beginning to end or work backwards. In my particular case, I didn't create the budget first. I could have easily went to this chart and said, all right, I have 4 level 8s. 4 level 8s here puts me at 1,800. This one puts me at 3,600. This one puts me at whatever. And this one puts me at 8,400. So for an easy encounter, I only have a budget of 1,800. For a deadly encounter, I have a budget of 8,400. Now let me look through the monster book and start wrangling in and figuring out as I did with the Clay Golem and the Blood Witch. But for the example here, what I did is I made the monster first and I went backwards. I made the monster, I made all these changes as you saw. I figured out what his defensive CR was, what his offensive CR was. I made the changes based on traits, which is shown in that long list on the DMG of what does this trait modify and change. It created an average CR. I looked at the little CR chart, or you can simply flip through your monster manual and just say, what are some other CR 14 monsters and what kind of EXP are they worth? That gives you the number, which then you refer to the chart, and it kind of shows you where that monster is. Now, is that true or not? I'll finish the video and end it with that premise again, or that idea again, that always consider the makeup of your group. Is this truly an overly difficult encounter? Looking at the Tarasque recently, I did a video on a barbarian fighting him. If your PCs have the ability to fly and be 100 feet up in the air with longbows, if you really, really digest and look through all the details of everything the Tarasque can do, he can't hit you. That CR gets skewed significantly for arguably the most powerful monster in all of D&D, the iconic Tarasque. But even though some of his attacks have a 15-foot range and the guy's like 50 feet high, if you can be at the top of a mountainside shooting him with, the Rangers, Haldir's Rangers from Lord of the Rings, that becomes a CR1 encounter. Just because simply the makeup of the group says they can hurt the Tarasque eventually. It's going to take forever. And the Tarasque can't do anything to them. Likewise, on the flip side, if your demons and devils have wings and they fly and they go all over the place and there's, this hellish landscape and lava on the ground and your PCs are all walking into this encounter with just straight up no flying, they don't have a lot of range, they're melee guys, well, but now we get into the whole nuances of encounter, the environment as a whole, and They're all doing it on a rickety bridge, which has its own CR based on acrobatics checks to not fall off the bridge. You change everything. These are just some sort of baselines of how you can kind of Frankenstein and manipulate and make your own monsters, which is a good thing because it gives us guidelines based on some stuff that's already been play tested. So it gives us a good ground to work off of so that we don't feel like we're undermining or overplaying certain attributes and various choices that the PCs have made, because it's kind of balanced to begin with, as long as you adhere to what column it's in and so on. But it still gives you the freedom to make your own things, which is a good thing. And the reason why you want to is because it makes that encounter more unique. Not every goblin is the same. Not every orc is wearing kind of, ugly World of Warcraft-ish skulls and chains and spikes and boar's tooth armor, and they're wielding great axes. Maybe your orc has the ability to cast Reaction Shield, which changes his AC, which jumps him into a different CR rating than your typical orc as your PCs would expect, and so on and so forth. And the other thing that does is that expands the replayability of your books, so that when your PCs reach level 10, you no longer just have to say, well, everything that's CR 7 or lower, I don't use those monsters anymore. I'm only using the monsters in the big part of the book. No, you can still have, and there's multipliers on the amount of monsters that are involved in a fight if they grossly outnumber the PCs. You can still have kobolds be a major threat to your CR10 group. Okay? So, I've rambled enough. It's a long enough video. I hope that helped. What I'm going to do with this and why I kind of showed this to you is I'm going to take my fun fights and I'm going to create a new sort of category called Fun Fights Enhanced, where I'm going to not do it randomly. I'm going to kind of have the stuff laid out ahead of time, but I'm going to try. My big personal goal here is I'm going to recreate everything in the monster manual, but change it around to make everything in the monster manual feel balanced, so it works within the system, but unpredictable. So every monster, the iconic Mind Flayer and Beholder will be manipulated a little bit and shifted and changed so you no longer know what to expect anymore. That's my goal. This is my video. Thanks everyone for watching, and take care.